Okay, welcome everyone to today's webinar, how to get the most out of your LMS without spending six figures. Pretty much we're going to do exactly what it says on the tin today, whether you are looking to optimize your current LMS or you are indeed looking to procure a new one, and we'll talk about how you can get the most out of it in various different ways. So I'm Matt Dunphy. I'm a lead consultant in learning and development with Get Savvy. I'm joined by my colleague today, Alan Reid. Alan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. I'm very interested in the topic today. I think content creation is a often neglected topic, and it's one of the major parts of proving the value of your whole L&D offering. So really delighted to be getting into it today.
Great. So, and without further ado, let's get into it. So, whether you're new to the webinar or indeed you have seen us several times before, just a couple of items of housekeeping. And we do record these sessions and you do get to watch them back afterwards. So, if we are sharing detail on screen, we do that very much bearing in mind that you can watch back and review that later. Do please ask us any questions you've got. We really value your input in these hour sessions. So we'll cover any of those at the end. And then you'll see a little strap line on screen, which is really sharing a discount code. So as well as the copy of the 2025 research study from Get Savvy that you'll get after this session, we also give you a 50% discount on our LMS course, Managing Technology Change Projects for Business People. I am biased, and it's a really great course, and I do encourage you to avail of that offer. And then I'll briefly pass over to Alan, who's going to talk a little bit about who we are, some of our services, and some of our recent case studies. Alan.
Fantastic, thank you. So in short, we specialize in learning and development for membership bodies and charities. So we have a whole different series of models to help you. They're essentially focused on being low cost and transparent. So depending on the level of complexity and ambition you're aiming for, we have a clear open model that can get you from not having a system at all or having something you're not happy with to being able to provide online digitized self-paced content to your members. We're 100% independent of any technology or platform, which means any advice that we're giving you on how much money you need to spend or what are your options in the marketplace, it's all about you. It's all about your interests and getting the optimum value out of your investment budget. If we really simplify what we do with membership bodies and charities, there are these three areas that we tend to get involved in the most. So first of all, we're often asked to create an LMS for an organization. That could be because they're dipping their toe for the first time into digital learning and content provision for their members or stakeholders. So we have a model where we can put up a low-cost learning management system, integrate it into your CRM, integrate it into your website, and get you going really quickly and easily at an affordable rate. The second thing that we're often asked to do, and we're going to talk about that a lot today, is content digitization, where lots of organizations that we work with have vast libraries of excellent content, excellent knowledge, reports, previous webinars, all sorts of great white papers and so on, but it's not available to people outside the building. So we get asked to turn that into online self-paced content that's interesting and engaging for their members. And you'll see a lot of what we do in that later in this webinar. Something probably our most common starting point with organizations is organizations saying, we don't know what to do next. We don't know how much money we'll need. We don't know whether to invest in this or that, whether to keep this system or replace that system, and how to evolve an entire learning strategy. So we do a lot of short, sharp, inexpensive projects that are really about helping you work out what's the best use of your budget to have the optimum learning and development offering for your organization. Let me just talk about a couple of recent projects. The Royal Town Planning Institute, a fantastic organization, growing towards 30,000 members now. Their big remit is really about education and professionalization of their industry. So they have a large number of courses. They run courses every week and every month, and have a big annual program. They also have actual masterclasses, certifications, qualifications, and all of that historically was done in person, moving to via webinar over COVID, and now they want to make sure that as much of it as possible is entirely digitized, is entirely available on an on-demand model, but with actual qualifications, actual certifications. And their big thing there was they had a platform they weren't terribly happy with. They needed to understand their options to move away from that platform, how much money was required, what was available in the marketplace. So we've stepped them through and worked with them through that entire process of getting agreement on the big picture and then executing the plan that was agreed according to the organization. So they're now in a much more enabled position with a new technology partner and a very bright roadmap for 2026 for learning content for their members. This is a fantastic organization that we are delighted to be working with. So the British Menopause Society provide education to practitioners and clinicians in the NHS and elsewhere who are providing services to postmenopausal, post-reproductive women and people going through that period of life. And there's this vast audience for knowledge and help in that area. So what we've done with the British Menopause Society is we've started by looking at their current systems and what they have to offer. There was clearly a gap there and difficulties with the current system and provider. We've helped them to scope out what their options are moving forward, what budget is required to do that, and to put together requirements to go to market and look at new options. So the result of that is alignment and agreement across the organization with the board and the fund holders on exactly what the roadmap looks like, and then starting to execute that program of change so that they're in a vastly better position going into 2026. So we're really delighted to be working with them. Finally, I'll just say that to make the point that we work across any technology platform when it comes to it. So we're independent of any technology. So here are just some recent learning management platforms that we've worked with, and we're delighted to work across any platform that the organization is using already, and then advise on the difference and the pros and cons of any platform you're considering as well.
Great, Alan. Thank you so much. So if we get going then, after that introduction to who we are, in a moment, we're going to talk a little bit about getting the most out of your LMS by transforming what you do. So looking at your learning offering and various ways that you can transform. Next, we'll talk more practically about affordable LMS solutions, you know, the various options you've got, particularly at this time of year as you are looking to budget for next year. We'll talk and share about a content development process in 4 stages. Again, part of getting the most out of your systems is having good process, and we have a reliable process to share with you there. We'll then share our content development digitization demo today and talk about some of the services we provide, which may be an option to you. And then finally, we'll certainly take some questions, both those presets, and if we see anyone in the chat asking questions there, we will certainly be able to respond. So talking about an introduction then, again, we want to take a step back here and say, well, what is getting the most out of your LMS and your content without spending, you know, too much money or over £100,000? Really, for us, it starts in actually evaluating what you offer and looking at ways to transform it. And that doesn't need to be, you know, digital transformation at scale. That can be transforming the way you talk about what you do for learning. And I should say that's both whether you are an educational organization or indeed whether you are actually just looking at your own LMS for internal staff. Apologies, a slight jump on my screen there. So we're going to start with an insight from our 2025 research study. In that study, you'll see there are various insights around challenges in the sector at the moment. Some of these will not be a surprise to you in the organizations you're working with. So budget constraints is something we do hear a lot about. As you can see, I'll summarize the chart on screen, but a lot of this really for learning is still about securing those annual budgets at the level that you really need to operate well and get the most out of your systems. And I think what we're seeing increasingly is that refers then to digital education, how you digitize, and we'll talk more about that later. And of course, this conversation about AI, not only for core systems, but how that applies to your LMS as well. So we're definitely seeing some budget constraints. And again, to sort of ask ourselves the question, how do we get the most out of our LMS without overspending? Well, really for us, as I've said, this is about transformation. It's about understanding the learning offering and how you can actually promote that more and more, both to your members and external stakeholders, and of course to your budget holders, your board, your council, or indeed, where relevant, your SMT. So I think for anyone on the call, Alan, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what transformation means to us, or what you think it's worth considering in this vein at the moment?
Absolutely. And since the opening part of this is about the budgets, and that's an often asked question that we get, how much do we need to spend, and how do we justify the budgets? The finance director would rather spend the money on the CRM or the website, or an events management package, or whatever it is. So since the question is about money, how and needing money for your L&D platform, or solution, we suggest framing it in terms of money. We often explain to the finance director equivalent that our research shows very clearly that what your members value in a typical membership organization over anything else is learning content. So that's what's keeping them in membership. That's what is proving the value of membership to them. So relate the L&D spend to your membership value proposition and what's keeping people in. We've also got a ton of research that shows that one of the key things that will cause members not to renew is if they don't feel that learning offering is being topped up and refreshed. You're not going to go back to Netflix very often if you find that their content is not changing. So when it comes to justifying the ROI, we would suggest strongly relating it to membership, and the overall need to reduce churn and bring in new members, and also make the point that it's not a put in and forget technology. You can't just do it in year one and then stop spending on it after that. It really has to be an ongoing living thing that you're doing as part of your membership offering.
Great. Thank you. And certainly I would underline value and impact. What is the true value to your members of your learning offering, and what is the impact it's really having on their professional lives? So let's talk about that a little more. And again, this is a moment where you can watch back and read the detail fully. I will summarize it here. But again, if we say there's two conversations, with the one you have with your members or your external learners, stakeholders, and indeed the one you need to have with your budget holders, with your SMT. So on the left-hand side there, again, Alan's already described it. You want to be talking about the value of what you offer. And really for us, at the core of this is how it's driving career development, progression of people's careers, gaining key qualifications with you, or indeed if that's just particular courses that you run that no one else does, really, not being shy about describing that in your member marketing and communications, or indeed on your website or social media. So often you can talk about other things like the specific content that you deliver that no one else does. Alan mentioned this, and we do work with a number of healthcare clients. And so often they've got white papers, or they've got research that actually you just won't get, via ChatGPT or online elsewhere. It's protected content, and that means it's valuable. And of course, a lot of the organizations we work with have great speakers who are true experts in their field. So talking about things in that way really helps. And actually, we'll talk then and in a number of places today about paid for content and actually the value of being able to say, we know you shop around and we do have content under your membership offering, that you get for your fee every year. We do also have premium content that we really think you should also use, which is at an additional cost. And then certainly gaining feedback from your members and your learners. It can be missed in the busyness of our current working lives to actually look at what people are saying and to translate that through to what you do. And again, sort of that almost translates through to what you talk to your SMT about or to your board. Actually sharing figures at the top there around the demand can really wake up your leadership to actually, people are asking us for this. They need it from us. So how are we provisioning it? And then certainly talking about what's popular. Alan mentioned this, learning is a driver for member retention, satisfaction, and indeed new acquisitions. So talking to your SMT about the need to invest in it because it drives overall membership numbers. Other things to think about, and we will go on to this, is really talking about, being proud of where you've saved money before, or also being proud if you do generate content that can be monetized, where that is actually an income stream for the organization. And we always talk about this, talking a lot about LMS options and how you've done your research to find the one that's most economical. And that can also feed through to your content then as well. So that's sort of a summary of some of the things we suggest you do start talking to people about in this effort to transform the way you describe your learning offering and then get the investment you need to transform it even further. We'll move on now. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of a more practical subject, kind of linked to the title today. So, how do you look specifically at your LMS and ensure that it's affordable in the various different ways? So again, some of these will be an echo. I'll bring them all in at once and we can kind of talk about them in a summary. We do appreciate, it's October now, and you might not be on the calendar year, but most not-for-profits and professional membership bodies are. So you will be deep at the moment into thinking about the budget you need for next year and probably expecting those difficult conversations about constraints. And as Alan says, and we do hear it a lot, that core technology takes precedent, your website and your CRM and the learning budget can be minimized as a result. So there's lots of ways through buy-in with your SMT around some of the topics we've already shared to actually ensure you get the budget you need. A couple of extra points there, sort of the second and third is really about LMS itself and content. And we will elaborate on this, but our viewpoint will always stay the same. You don't want to cut down your quality, and you don't want to just have a technology that again, put it in and forget. You want something that is actually economical, and there are various different models, including Moodle, which is license free, that you can procure that will allow you to be more affordable for the organization overall. And then we've got a whole section on content coming up, but this really is understanding and describing what you can do yourselves to a high quality level, and what then needs to be done by a third party or a specialist, the additional support you might want to get around content. That leads to your team. And we always say two things here. You do need to invest in your team, and they are looking for career development. They are looking at the market, so you want to keep them by upskilling them and investing, particularly in AI for learning at the moment. And also you want to look at your processes in these areas so that they are efficient. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the webinar. And finally, then, again, we'll keep banging the drum for this. Just don't be alarmed to look at what you've got in terms of content and think about those areas where you can monetize, where it's appropriate, and where maybe it's somewhat adjacent to the core membership benefits that people pay for. Okay, and I think there's a section here which is about, well, what if I really enjoy or we like our current LMS? We're not looking to make a major change. It really is about optimization. So we've got several tips for that. Use your customer success team, or they might be called client services team, client success team, your support and change team. We do find that clients neglect this kind of inquiry into an academy that a technology supplier for learning might have, the events that they run, their account management lead who has lots of great things about what the system does and what's coming up. So, if you're a leader right now, delegate your team or your leads to the client success, the customer success team for advice and optimization. Um, we would always say negotiate around costs for any new development, simply because that's a good thing to do. I'm sure many of you are doing it, but sometimes the first or second answer from your current supplier about what you can enhance in your LMS needs some scrutiny. And again, we provide free consultation and support around those areas as well. So, just really making sure the price is right for anything new you do. And again, it's like in a slightly different angle here, the message around, your team. Of course, it is about upskilling them, but it is more strategically thinking about what content development you keep in house, what you need to manage in house versus what your supplier is there for. So getting that ratio of spending with your current LMS supplier is really important. And of course, we say all this because I hope you remember, you are a loyal customer to them, you are a long-standing customer, you want the relationship to be positive over the long term. So these are definitely things you can ask for or indeed insist upon if you are currently happy and you just want to optimize what you've currently got. And I think there is certainly a point we'll make here, which is about the balance of spending overall. And we tend to have a company line or key advice, which is like, look, you're going to need to invest in your technology. That is just the way it is. But it's certainly with license-free technology, you can economize there. And there are other ways to negotiate good pricing for the system itself. We really think you should be focusing primarily on your actual content, because let's face it, that's the bit the member sees, that's the bit the learner experiences. That's the area where as feedback they take away a positive sense of what you do and what you provide them and its impact, or they're going to go elsewhere, or they're going to stop learning with you. So really do think about prioritizing what your budget looks like for content next year at the moment. And then I think I'll summarize the 5 areas here, and then perhaps, Alan, I'll bring you in on again some more of your insight. So, we've talked about these 5 key areas where you can actually get the most out of your LMS, transforming what you do, and also thinking about affordability. So I'll pick out a couple of themes again. You can read yourself on screen. But if we think about securing overall budgets, have a 3-year plan. Thinking strategically and talking to your S&T in that way can make the investment conversation easier. It lets them know you've got a roadmap, and particularly if you do need to change systems over the course of a number of years, rather than just thinking you're going back for what we'll do for next year. Thinking about your LMS then, and we've talked a little bit about this, but it is a common theme for us. Challenge platform costs. If there are costs with your existing supplier or your new one, if you're procuring a supplier, look at the costs in detail and look at various areas, ask questions, and seek out discounts, seek out, cutting away anything that you really don't need for your organization. That can save money there. In terms of content and actually digitize dynamic content in the middle there, the key advice we would say is get the levels of sophistication right. We'll talk about that coming up. Prioritize what you want to spend money on and what your members value most, and think about the level of sophistication of content you need to apply, whether that's yourselves or with a third party. And with your team, I've already mentioned, creating SMEs in your team. Think about your internal team as your experts. You can lean on third parties, but you want to feel like even if it's 1 or 2 people, they are really good at what they do, and then they are driving the agenda forward. And as I say, your LMS processes are processes for your organization. Interrogating those for any waste and any opportunities to be more efficient is also important in terms of getting the most out of your LMS overall, and particularly with the introduction of AI, when there's actually easy ways with a good supplier to add AI in a way that might minimize some of the effort for your team. And again, you hear us saying it again and again, look at where you can monetize. And I think to give you a new message here, it's really about pinpointing via the feedback from your members and your own judgment what you could monetize, and actually using that as a test case. If you've not done this before, you're only collecting membership fees. pick one or two artifacts or assets that you might be able to test on your website as the potential for a new income stream. So, Alan, there's a lot in there. And just kind of stepping back and us having a bit of a conversation about this at the moment. What leaps out to you overall about getting the most out of LMS and keeping those costs down?
Sure. So not too much to add to what you've already covered, but I will say that uh, these days we would say to most organizations you would have to have a really strong justification, in our view, for going for a licensed learning management system, because what you can do in an unlicensed license-free model is the same. There's no difference in capacity. So therefore, our message is very much: don't spend your money on licenses, spend your money on content. And those licenses can actually consume your entire learning and development budget if you're not careful. We've seen the people really be shocked by the costs of that. Then the other thing I'll say really briefly is that we're working on a lot of projects now where we're helping organizations create monetized content or just more sophisticated content for their members. And the reason for that, the reason that's easy to cost justify, if you like, what it will be helpful, I think, for most delegates on this webinar is to ask themselves the really frank question, which is: how much of my LMS or learning and development content changes every month? And if the answer is, as with most organizations, next to nothing changes from one month to the next, or you might get a new webinar video or podcast video once a month, then ask yourself the question as well: if I were a member, how often would I be coming back to visit that unchanging content? So when it comes to learning content that is monetized or just more sophisticated, it's very easy these days, because the costs of creating it are much, much lower than they used to be, to justify that by way of saying, this is what is going to reduce our membership churn. This is what is going to keep our members coming back and spending more money with us. So don't just look at the costs, look at the opportunity and look at the income streams, I guess, is the short version of my message around that.
Great. And I think, yeah, just again to go back to that, some of this is just good finance. If you can prove there's a growing income stream in your learning areas, as well as proving how much it is directly connected to membership engagement and retention, you can then kind of prove the business case for, as you say, investment in more digitization in your content. Great. Well, as I say, this is available for you to peruse after today in more detail. Let's sort of move on now to a little bit more discussion about content development, a bit of a deep dive into process. And again, under the webinar's title today, how are we getting the most out of our LMS through understanding we have an established process, and also we have a way to generate content. We do call it the Netflix factor, Alan and I. How can you ensure that in some way, shape, or form your content's being refreshed? You're digitizing more assets so that it feels attractive to your members and your learners. So just to look at another statistic from our research study, and probably one of the most overwhelming, I think, that we saw when we looked at what people responded to, is that 93% of the organizations we spoke to really put content digitization at the top of their agendas. And that's probably both this year, and I would suggest that's continuing into future years. And I think there is a reality here, and there's no penalty, that, we see a lot of LMSs where the content, makes rational sense. It will allow you to progress through it and to get a certificate at the end. But, the design elements or the sophistication elements are in some cases lacking, or just we know when we speak to teams, they want to do more. So again, we will show you some services that we offer which can help there. But generally speaking, if you're looking at these areas, yourselves, it is about understanding that content needs to be digitized now in a good LMS. And there are various different ways you can do that without spending six figures. And one thing we do know is important, and again, I'll move through this, is, what do you really keep yourselves versus what do you kind of hand over to a third party or work in partnership and collaboration with. So I'll deal with the ones that we keep first, and certainly forgive if some of these are obvious. We underline them for common sense reasons. You're going to want to keep things in-house content wise that are easy to manage. They are the things that, even if you've got a junior member of the team and they are actually developing skills in LMS, or actually to flip this, they may be very digitally competent, but there's just task work that they can do in the course of their role. Certainly keep that stuff, as something that you do in house. If it's upskilling, I'm always a big believer in this. As we need to drink our own champagne, as they say. You need to be upskilling your internal L&D leads, and often there is a course or there's an area of modular development or digitization that you keep because you're growing your team's capability, and that's really important. And then, of course, when it's management, in a broader way, if this is things that just keep a good LMS going, things that your team can configure, manage, oversee, you're never really going to want to outsource that for obvious reasons. And the cost will be higher per unit per hour of time. So that's why you have a team. And indeed, I would say, it is challenging circumstances, but that's always going to be the pivot moment between whether you might add a head, add another member of your team versus economize what you spend externally. That can go either way, I feel. Actually, looking more directly then at what you would outsource, I'll bring these in and we can discuss them. Again, not in all circumstances, always up for debate, but using a good third-party specialist for content development, digitization, perfect when it's complex and time-bound. When you have a deadline, I know the chief exec has said, I want, a flagship course by next year. We want something we want to lean on in the overall membership offering. Certainly would consider treating it as a mini project, talking to a good third party. We do this, other specialists do it in the market. So that's one. I think when it's complex, and again, this is not to denigrate the internal team, but when you really want something that's complex digitally, in terms of actual development, you might consider doing that. And I think that probably links to the second point there. When it's truly transformative, there are occasions where, let's say it's a flagship course you want to introduce, there's new policy and you want to kind of change the way your organization talks about something in your membership area. You might just give it to a third party with instruction and guidance, and you'll receive back a high quality, highly digitized course or courses that you can then, promote within your LMS offering overall. So that's another one. And then I would just go back to it. I'm kind of talking about it anyway today, but relative cost benefit. If you weigh this up, and you should, by the way, and say, look, this is going to be the same benefit or higher if we outsource it, it's worth the cost, fine. That might be an occasion where you sort of send something out. And again, Alan will talk to you about this later, but that might well be a volume. When you actually have a volume of items to digitize, the cost benefit may well be to outsource that. So I'm hoping this is one you'll return to when you're watching the video, but it's certainly kind of what do we keep versus what do we healthfully ship out to a good third party, to a specialist. So I think moving on from there, we could talk a little bit, and I will bring in all of these areas, about what is essentially our version of established content development, content digitization process. It's in 4 easy stages, and I do underline that these are easy stages. And I think, Alan, what I'll do is I'll describe these, and I'll bring you in on a couple which I know are very close to your heart.
Sure.
So look, first, no surprises, but usually what we find when we step on board with a client is there is a low level of certainty about the actual courses they've got at the moment. And indeed, if you've not got an LMS out there, that might actually be, well, what are we doing for learning? What events, masterclasses, or materials are we using specifically for education? But usually it can mean you've got an LMS, it's built up over time, you've got valuable courses, you've got courses that are just hanging about. So certainly doing that and reaching an ultimate clarity about what you want to keep and digitize versus what you might archive is really what this stage is about. Secondarily, there prioritization. Again, there's a simple version of this, but we do feel this is the stage where, if we were working with you, we would be talking a lot about, well, what are you going to invest in? What does need to be the highest level of sophistication and quality versus things that you can tidy up and design that are the mainstay of your LMS. So there's a conversation there about true business prioritization, and that can lead to the roadmap of what content you look at first versus what can come later. Then we talk about sprints. We have sprints for all types of technology change, but for learning, it's no different. This is kind of a stage by stage approach where you're obviously going to be involved. And again, if you're a leader on this call, you're going to be talking to your teams about protecting some of their time to be involved with a third party. Or indeed, if you are doing this fully yourselves, it's going to be getting the actual content storyboard together, the structure of a new course or several modules, and working that up towards a storyboard, and then working probably with a supplier around design and storyboard, or then articulate or other technologies, and then moving through the iteration testing and final production and deployment of that into your system. And then finally, this is a big point for Alan and I. The fourth stage is really continuous improvement. It is the Netflix factor. You can congratulate yourself when you've released a really good course or a set of courses, but the demand will continue. So you do need to think about how well that stuff has landed and actually what you're going to go and prioritize next. So what we've done here is take a little bit of approach about, well, what do you do as a client versus what might you look to outsource if you're considering a specialist here. So in the audit setting, obviously you are closest to your members, to your team, to the insights that you're gathering. So you want to kind of collate that and get yourselves a sense of what members enjoy, what the demand is, what their more constructive or challenging feedback is around what you do. And then I would suggest you start the process of auditing by either speaking to your current supplier or actually looking yourselves at an index of your current courses and putting your own value assessment against that. Which ones do you know are really top value versus which ones are kind of also runs? And then looking at a supplier, then they are going to do their own technical audit and analysis of what you've got, and they're definitely going to issue some top findings, and that will again probably point at things like where you need to digitize and potentially where you could use AI or richer features. And then, of course, they will give you recommendations for how you do that. So, Alan, I know audit is often kind of a strategic point in any process. Do you want to talk a little bit about your view on what clients can do sort of in this space around content?
Absolutely. And despite having the word audit in it, actually, the content audit for an organization embarking on a potential LMS or learning and development project is actually sometimes the most interesting, because what we find more often than you might think is that membership organizations and some charities are sitting on an absolute goldmine of content. They've got fantastic things that have been built up over years. And it's not just the courses that they're currently delivering in person. When you start framing things in an entirely different way, you're now thinking about things that could be delivered all over the world digitally, with interaction built into it, and all sorts of different ways of making it come alive. On screen. You then start taking a fresh look at all of your white papers, all of your research, all of your knowledge. Sometimes in some organizations we've worked with, they have physical artifacts that are beautiful documents, sometimes very old, sometimes very elaborate. And in the old days, you had to physically come to the building to look at these things. So take a fresh look. This is what we do. We bring together our research of what members really value, sometimes what they'll pay for, and what you've got, but looking at things you might not have thought of looking at. And then we include that in the options that you might consider digitizing with a benefit for digitizing the different types of elements. And this can be a very easy way, a very cheap way in many cases, of starting off with a really big catalog that your members won't exhaust on day one, but also to keep dropping new things into your content. They don't have to be hugely elaborate courses. They can be 5 minutes of micro content that is based on an existing artifact. members will really value those things. And there's a lot for you to talk about in terms of social media and promotion and so on in keeping that offering fresh. So it's a much more interesting phase of the project than the word audit might suggest.
Yes, got you. I think this is almost a, yeah, as you say, a strategic exercise. Thank you. I'm going to cover the next two stages, and then I'll bring you in at the end. So, if we think about, prioritization, again, prioritization has a slightly clinical or sanitized, definition to it. But really, as you see on screen there, this is your wish list, your must list, and your swear word list. It's the things you really do want to do more with your content for learning. What the more exciting things either you or your members are raising for the future. And of course, it is the must do's, the things that provide the most value now, that are core to your learning offering. They matter most to your members. And, really prioritization still is about the courses you want to archive, just get rid of, over time. And I know there's effort attached to that, but just understanding, look, nobody in the organization feels this is worth the effort anymore. Let's look to, take it down now. Where a supplier can certainly help there is validating those lists and truly giving you a sense of cost and time and value in actually sophisticating your content in different places. I'll pause on that one because I think we'll show you what we do in a couple of moments. But you do want to get that right about where you invest and how much that's going to cost. Looking then at the next stage, which is about the actual sprint, again, we cover all sorts of technologies. There's usually a design and delivery stage. So I think just to be particular to learning here in our process, you are going to want to be involved, and particularly you're going to want to kind of define content or actually edit it down in whatever way, either using AI tools or just talking to your teams. Even if it's a transfer of content, you're going to want to review it. You're going to want to look at sharing brand guidelines, and I've called it content rules here. But there might be mandatory definitions that must stay on screen as text, or a quotation of certain laws that you comply with. And that's something you're going to lead on. And of course, you're going to want to collaborate with your supplier, including around testing and sign off of content when it's ready to be deployed. And simply speaking, your supplier will do the rest. They'll have a real lead on storyboarding, the stages of design, including your feedback, and positioning you to test what's there, and then final production and deployment, including just using AI tools actually in increasing terms to test things as a system and make sure they're safe to be deployed. And then, Alan, I'll bring you in on this one, which is the continuous improvement piece. I know that this is something you're very passionate about as well. But of course, you've just released something, you want to test that it is of sufficient impact. So I think what you're going to need to do is, I say focus groups, that might actually be talking to your executive, your senior management team, talking to some friendly users who actually learn with you and seeing what they think. And you can bind that back into what you're looking to prioritize next. I think in terms of what your supplier does here, and just forgive, I'll just make sure I'm moving along my screen. Okay. And just bear with. I'm just checking, Alan. You can still see my screen, okay?
Yeah, just fine. So just while you're doing that, so on the topic of continuous improvement, then, so I completely agree, Matt, that something that people often forget is to carry on listening to their members and stakeholders. It costs nothing to basically ask people what they think of your content, what they'd like to see more of. Just do quick snapshots for people of all of that. But also the key point is that what used to be the barrier when it came to continuous improvement was that it costs so much to produce content. It costs so much to make changes to the platforms. And that's no longer the case. We're going to show you some actual money costs of content creation now. And it's really plummeted in the last few years since the availability of new tools. But also, it needs some creativity. So, for instance, we're working with an organization now that what they're doing is they're producing continuous new content by asking their members to do top tips. What would you advise someone coming into the industry? What really matters in this context of this challenge here? And the top tips then become a 3 to 5 minute interview with this person. And then that's simply topped and tailed and, turned into a tiny bit of video production and then put onto the learning platform, put onto the catalog. And these are insights from people who've been doing this for 30 years, and it's explained in 3 minutes, and it's this particular topic. And the take up is enormous. People, love this stuff, costs next to nothing to produce. So what we would suggest is, in terms of continuous improvement, you should ideally be looking at the months and quarters ahead of you and thinking about it like you're a theatre manager or you're a television producer or something like that on a smaller scale, and thinking about what you're continually going to be changing with checkpoints where, to go to Matt's point, you're going back to your members, doing surveys, asking questions to see what's really working, and those kind of things will keep it alive and keep it proving its value to you.
Great. Thank you there. And I don't know, I've got a mouse chewing the Ethernet or some hiccup in the Wi-Fi, but we're back on. Brilliant, Alan. Thank you. So as you've indicated, we're going to look now at the demo. I'll bring this up as you're introducing it, and then
Great.
yeah, we can talk about various elements in our pricing model.
Fantastic. So just while Matt's bringing up this is something we use when we're talking to an organization that isn't used to content digitization yet. So we're trying to explain the difference between a fairly basic level of digitization, something that's a bit like a PowerPoint slide, that kind of thing that we're all used to. Then we talk about slightly more sophisticated content digitization where people can start to interact with the content. And then we can talk about things like video and interactive video and gamification and scenarios. So we use this, which Matt's just putting onto the screen, as a way of trying to get it across to people as we go. So if we start with level one, so the topic hardly matters, but we're explaining to people what is digital eye strain. If you're going to spend your day, as we all do, staring at a screen, what can come from that, and what can you do about it? So level one, we've got an image of somebody with an apparent headache, and we've got some bullet points on the screen, and that's okay. It does a job, and you're probably going to have some of that in most content that you create. But of course, people get bored quickly. They're not terribly impressed by that. So what's more common now is that you'll have a lot more level two content. So if we show that, what we have with level two is you get a little bit more movement on the screen. You instead of bullet points, you'll tend to have icons. You have some way that the learner can interact with the content. Again, it doesn't matter what the content is, but they have to go and get it a little bit. It's there and it's illustrative to them. They're awake. They're not just staring passively at the screen. They're doing something with the screen. So that's the same content, but brought to life a little bit more and a bit more engaging for the member. And then again, you're likely to have some of level one. You're going to have level two in some of your content, and then you'll keep your level three content for some particular set pieces. So in this example here, what we've done is we've created an interactive and very visual way of saying, all right, here are your risk points around your office for eye strain and what you could do about it. So what we're asking the learner to do here is to click into different parts of their real life environment. And when you click into the different parts of the real life environment, you can move around the room. Oh, wow, what's going on here? And then you can say, all right, so what's so dangerous about this shelf over here then? So when they click into the thing, you can see that you're able to say, all right, well, you should set a timer to get you to move around a bit and not just stare at your screen all day. So what should I know about my monitor position? Well, here's what you should know about your monitor position. What's my chair doing to me? Oh my goodness! And so you've got it all there on the screen, and people can interact with it. So the different levels of content sophistication take more to do and take more skills to do as you go up. What we tend to find, going back to Matt's point about in-house versus outsource, is that most projects now are very blended. So a lot of organizations will do the level one content themselves, but they'll invite us in for bits of level 2, 3, and 3+, which you're about to look at in a second, which is where they want to, we'll do the course together. They'll keep their budget as much as possible to themselves, which we encourage. We want people to be independent, and then they'll use us for the more sophisticated stuff as well. So all of those models work. So with the three and a bit, if you like. That's with the KC stands for knowledge check. So what we're doing there, we've got a catalogue of around about 60 different ways that you can interact with people to say, have you really understood this? So this is one of the simplest ways, where it's a bullet point and a submit and a bit of feedback. What we do have though is essentially you can do drag and drop. You can have people moving things around into different shells and so on. So, but it gives you interactive real-time feedback that's AI driven very often these days, and will tell you where you should go and redo a bit of the course. So that was just a really quick overview of different levels of content. But just while Matt brings the presentation back, we do make the point that these days in 2020 or so on, pretty much everything was level one content. It was a glorified PowerPoint. And so what we found that members reacted that way. They didn't interact with it, and they got bored quickly. Now that it's very common now to have courses made up entirely of level 2 and level 3 with lots and lots of knowledge checks in there, then members are responding much more positively. They're much more likely to engage with the content. And thank you, Matt. I just wanted to bring up this slide here just to make one really simple point, which is that the costs for content development since 2022, today, content development costs are about a third of what they were in 2022. So we've simplified this to a really huge degree, but we sometimes find that organizations will have this whole catalog of going back years of content, and they just hand it to us in a big lump and say, can we turn this into engaging interactive content online, or just digitize it in a better way than it is right now? So the cost of it now, for instance, if we had a slide deck that was somewhere between 10 and 50 slides, obviously that's quite a range. For if you went to the most sophisticated level of all of it being level 3, which it never would be, for a 10 slide deck mini course, it's less than £1,000 to turn that into an entirely digitized interactive piece of content. It would have cost 3 or even 5 times that much. But now we're using AI driven tools. We share the time savings with our clients. Of course, our clients are using AI driven tools as well. So all of that means that you're better able to serve your members than you ever have been before, that you can take this library and catalog that you've got going back years and turning it into this modern asset that's all fresh and doing great things for your member value proposition for very little money. So there really is no excuse for not keeping your content fresh these days, for not continually updating and adding more to your catalog online. So great, thanks, Matt. That was the main point I wanted to make about that one.
Yeah, thank you. And I will actually add to this. You can see very transparent set of costs on screen. We like to share that about what we do. I think this approach is really valuable as well. If you need to kind of look at volume, so if there is a volume of various courses or artifacts to digitize that you really need to do in a set of quick sprints. Certainly, I think this approach really helps, as well as you've already seen with the demo, locking in the different elements of sophistication that you want. There are certain courses that you want that level 3 and that almost immersive experiential digitization and dynamic content. There are other elements where level 1 is absolutely fine. It's good design, it's good content, and it's presented well. Great. I think, Alan, in the interest of time, I know we've got a few preset questions, so I think I'll summarize, and then we can have a final chat about those preset questions and what's coming up for us. So I think if I summarize, as you see on screen there, we talked a lot today about how do I get the most out of LMS? Well, a lot of it is, transforming your learning offering and indeed making sure that you win the fight, either internally or just with reality around the budget that you do need for the coming years, to do what you do effectively. You're going to need to look at balance. Often this is to maintain quality both in your system and your content. You're going to need to look at how much you're really willing to spend in the area of technology, and we have continued advice around what seems to be a right amount. we've talked about six figures today. We do know some clients need to spend that much, but often you can do this under that cost bracket. And then, what you need to spend, given it's what the member sees, what the learner experiences in terms of your content. You've seen a lot from us today on just how good that can get and structuring your processes around it. And then we have specifically talked in content terms, which I think is always on people's minds. You can overspend on third party services, or you can restrict your team from doing a lot, or it can be overloading your team and not spending externally at all. So some of this getting the most kind of moniker does apply to DIY content, what you keep in house versus outsourcing, what you do collaborate with a third party on. So that's sort of a summary of today. And I think we'll skip a poll just because I think in the interest of time, we wanted to talk to a couple of questions that came in before the webinar. So I've got one here, Alan, and I might get your
Yes,
view on
please.
it, which is kind of to summarize. There's a couple here, but the first one that came in was really about like, we're just stuck in this place of not getting the right budget that we need every year. We're constantly being challenged downward. How do we prove the business case? We've talked about that a lot today, but what's some additional tips and guidance you could offer?
I think frame it in terms of money. Do not be afraid to frame it in terms of money. So we're working with an organization right now that is asking about how to prove their member value proposition. And what we've had a really frank conversation with them to say, look, how long would it take your member to consume all of your content? Imagine they just wanted to join, suck the life out of the orange juice in the piece of orange, and then they're done. How long would it take to consume all of that? And they answered frankly, basically a month. It would take a month to consume everything we've got that's available to you. And we're adding in, one training course a month, one event a month to run. And we're explaining then, well, if you're expecting your member life cycle to be more than a year, and ideally 3+ years, then you've got to put yourself in a member's position and justify the cost of that, and use that justification to reduce your member churn. So I think framing it in cash terms, don't be afraid to do that. It's one of the main areas I'd say come and talk to us, by the way, because we're very used to having these conversations. We're very used to explaining the ROI, and we're very used to talking about opportunities for monetization as well. But be prepared to fight back on money terms for your budget is a key piece of advice I would suggest.
Brilliant, Alan. And I've got another one, and probably a second one, and then we'll move to close. But yeah, this one's great, and I will summarize. I think it's saying that we do think we're overspending on our current LMS. There's lots of elements we need to pay for. It's broken down into many different costs, including licensing. How do we actually, challenge that? Is it just a cost we need to accept?
I would say no. I have a mini rant I don't have time to go into about the lack of transparency in particularly with licensed LMS products that are out there. Often people are expected to make a guess of how many learners they will get, and they're expected to make that guess over 3 years because you sign up for a 3-year term. And even if your number of learners doesn't materialize, you have to pay that sum of money. And if your learners do go up, then the costs per learner can be frightening. And there goes your budget with all of that. So no, I think you can go and discuss that and negotiate. Be very, very conservative when it comes to estimating your number of learners. But also, as an option, we've worked with a lot of organizations where we've put up a replacement LMS that's a license-free model, migrated the content, integrated it into the CRM and website. And that entire exercise has cost less than one single year of maintenance. So you do have a choice. And I think that's one of the main things for organizations to remember.
Great, thank you, Alan. And I think without further ado, we might look to close. So I'm just going to move this towards here. But yeah, thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Again, if you've got any questions after the webinar, you can certainly get in touch with us at alan.reid@getsavvy.co.uk. And we do find people kind of have reflections and questions afterwards sometimes. So just to finalize then, Again, a reminder on our services. We do have our own LMS. We do offer that as a way that you can replace your current LMS, or indeed start with your first LMS using our services and our technology, including hosting. You've seen today we do a lot in the sphere of content development and digitization, and often, great or small, you can come to us for that level of support around getting more content onto your current LMS. And we love these broader services around kind of evaluating your learning offering overall. How do you transform? How do you look at your strategy and roadmap for learning over multiple years? Or indeed point support, if you want to come in and just get some periodic advice from us in a particular area of learning, that is certainly an option. And then finally, then just a few reminders that I mentioned up front. We will share the recording after the session today. You do get access to both the research study. You'll get a copy of that. Please encourage you to read that. And again, if you have any need for a conversation with us, come back to us around it. You will get the 50% discount to the Get Savvy course. So if you are embarking on a change project, you want to learn more yourself, that is half price under our offer as a delegate. And again, on wider things, if you want a no strings free consultation, our team can certainly have one with you. Just get in touch. Looking at the next couple of webinars coming up, we actually have a broader AI theme in our research study, and we are going in that direction ourselves in the next two webinars. The final two webinars of the year will focus on both how you get to grips with the AI features that are out there across all of your technologies, and then later in November, how do you get started? We're seeing a lot of AI awareness in the sector right now, including around AI for learning, and people are needing to push on to action and some adoption of AI. So we're going to talk about that later in November. So that's it from us. Just to say a big thank you, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. See you at the next webinar.